Both in YouTube and in Twitch, it's quite common for people to ask me what kind of runes I'd take on Thresh, and though people ask about all sorts of builds, for now I'm going to keep it very simple and short and just talk about what I would play in top lane. Mainly 2 rune pages. If you want to play Thresh top in what I believe at least is the most viable way, then these 2 are the rune pages you're probably going to want to use. Of course, feel free to post what you use, what you recommend, and what you change about these rune pages in the comments below, and if you play him anywhere else, and of course, if you want me to do a follow-up and look at maybe some more meme AD Thresh builds, or even just other lanes. First of all, Grasp of the Undying both plays to the advantage of Thresh's auto-attack poking and solves one of his major issues in top lane, which is his lack of sustain. Against most melee enemies, Grasp is really good and is actually really good against a lot of ranged enemies as well, such as Gangplank. I know he's melee, but we know what his Q does. Teemo, Quinn, and can help you go even on them, especially if you take Second Wind against poke champions. This could be anyone from Teemo, Quinn, even Urgots, I would count as champions to take Second Wind against. If you're not taking Second Wind, it may seem like an amazing idea to take Conditioning, but there's a lot of champions with really powerful combos, all-ins, and for those you want Bone Plating. By default, Bone Plating is probably one of the best runes to take, because it's not too easy to miss Second Wind when you end up in a ranged matchup. At least Bone Plating does something, but if you end up in a matchup against someone like Aurelia or Set, then you'd probably wish you had Bone Plating when you actually have Second Wind. So if you want to just leave it at something and forget about it, Bone Plating is what you want. Conditioning is great when you don't have to worry about the laning phase too much at all, which isn't actually very common, which is why I'm kind of writing it off. But if you think you can get away with not having either of these, try Conditioning by all means. In fact, if you practice with Conditioning rather than these 2, maybe you'll be practicing without a crutch that I am far too used to now. For the top runes, Shield Bash is the only one that actually has any impact in a lane fight or trade, but I think that it's kind of minimal, and though it does help with Lantern, Lantern is a very long cooldown with utility attached to it, and you kind of want to have that open in any time past laning phase to save teammates rather than shield yourself unless you're in a 1v1. Though it does give you some benefits, I think most times where you wish you had Shield Bash are lanes that you probably didn't have much of a fighting chance anyway, and when you are able to win a fight, you'd rather than win harder or win more with Shield Bash, you'd rather win harder and snowball with Demolish by taking tower plates. This can also force more pressure in top lane, forcing teleports to come back up to top rather than bot or mid or jungle, force enemies to feel like they have to defend top lane rather than just yeeting down to dragon every 6 minutes, etc. There's lots of reasons to build Demolish. Thresh naturally is kind of bad at taking towers, so Demolish really helps. With this rune page and most top lane builds, you should be going for a Tank Mythic into Titanic Hydra. That's a lot of health. While Grasp is weaker on ranged and it won't scale amazingly, it will help, but the health will really help Demolish. If you want to go Gale Force top lane as well, then at least go for a Dead Man's Plate or some kind of tankiness afterwards. You're free to build full AD if you want, but by that point you're past my recommendation. Speaking of health, Overgrowth is a good rune, but most of the time I'll take Revitalize, and that is mostly because of the secondary rune choice of Ravenous Hunter. In almost all of the on-hit builds, the only lifesteal you take is from Ravenous Hunter unless you build Immortal Shield Bow, and lifesteal on Thresh is significantly weaker than Ravenous Omnivamp that you want, and it's kind of awkward building something like Ravenous Hydra, especially when Titanic Hydra is such a good item in so many of the builds, and you can't build both. Going with that, Taste of Blood is very good for the same reason as Grasp and even Second Wind, and of course all of these work very well together with a Revitalize heal. It gives shield power as well, buffing any items you buy, shields from other players, heals from other players, your own Grasp, your own Ravenous Hunter, they work really well together. Overgrowth is great, especially if you think that your team simply has so much healing that the entire enemy team is going to have Ignite and Executioner's Calling or whatever Grievous runes, then maybe you'd rather go for just straight up tankiness rather than something the enemies can reduce. Unflinching is good as well, but I find it's mostly unnecessary, and when you really need the tenacity, just Merc Treads will do, although it does help against full AD teams where you still need tenacity, although that's quite rare. But again, for a kind of fire and forget default page, this is pretty good. In fact, this entire thing right now that we've got on the screen is a pretty good default page that you can rely on in pretty much every game. But if you do fine tune, for example, armor versus magic resist, second wind versus bone plating, and even overgrowth versus revitalize, you can get away with more. If you don't like taste of blood, and if you just want to focus on snowballing, you can go for eyeball instead, but I really would not underestimate the lane sustain that you need, and this is why I'm so keen on grasp instead of something like press the attack that I used to build in the past. This is probably the best top lane Thresh page you can have. I will, however, give one more, because sometimes 450 range grasp of the Undying procs are very dangerous, and that is when you want fleet footwork instead. You could take something like Aftershock to reduce damage, but rather than anything like that, fixing Thresh's main problem of sustain is really important. Fleet footwork lets you sustain without hitting the enemy, you can just hit minions instead, meaning you don't even have to get into their range, and as a ranged champion it's actually easier for you to just kind of hang back and hit CS when you need to against most melee champions, unless they're zoning you really hard, in which case you can maybe play around tower, hook them under, obviously only if they let you. I'm mostly, when I say fleet footwork instead of grasp and champions that you don't want to take grasp into, I immediately think of Set, but Volibear, Darius are champions as well. Sometimes I'll take grasp into Darius, but to be truly safe you should take fleet. Most of these are champions that can kill you in one rotation if you're not too careful, and when you're low, they will threaten you all game and you'll have no CS. For that reason, fleet footwork lets you sustain without getting anywhere near them and taking any risk. And just as a side note, not a rune, but Doran's shield can really help you when you're in such a position and prevent you from getting into Thresh's terrible HP base regen. For runes, Triumph will always be good, but Overheal can work really well and help you in lane, especially for these all-in champions where you want to have that bit of extra help that might save your day and mean that you don't lose too much value from fleet footwork when you're already full. Pretty useful. Now, we're doing this with the idea that you're still going to run a tank build or at least a Gale Force into a tank build, so I'd rather take Alacrity over Bloodline. Bloodline is good on AD builds that do not naturally have lifesteal, which normally doesn't happen because most of the time you build Shield Bow when you're going for some kind of big on-hit build. So Alacrity usually is the way. Between these three, Last Stand tends to be the one that you want as a tankier champion, but if you are building full crit for some reason, then you can go ahead and take Coup de Grace, because that's what you're after. If you are building full AD carry, and you're playing AD carry actually, take Cull and Cut Down. But for the most part, for top lane, as we're talking about, Last Stand will do. The usual runes are really good. Ravenous Hydra, very, very good sustain option for the soul on hit you're going to be doing, for the Titanic on hit you're going to be doing, and will work as well with the effective HP you gain from the resistances you buy and the infinite armor you get from souls. Essentially, we have a mix of, in both rune pages, surviving early game and scaling hard late game with things like Omnivamp, attack speed. The problem with this one, it's very defensive. There is no demolish, so if you do get a good gank off or even a solo kill with fleets, it's less likely you're going to get a tower plate, and there's much more risk involved with taking tower plates because you have to overextend for a much longer period of time than if you had demolish, and then you're gankable. Even like TP run at you in anger will work most likely unless you move early, meaning that you don't get any tower plates at all. But sometimes just surviving is what you need to do. Thresh has a really good scaling with his infinite armor, infinite on hit. He has infinite AP as well, but we usually don't care about that one unless we're full Ooga Booga. So these are, oh, okay, a game crashing. That's great, Riot, thank you. Give me Aatrox back and I'll maybe off it. So there we have our two main pages, Grasp and Fleet. Both of these are what I would take into top lane, and anything else I'd consider meme-worthy or not tryharding. These are the two things I would mainly use if I was playing in, like, really trying to win as much as possible. With a support champion like Thresh taking into the top lane, you really have to make up for those downsides of his, like his terrible HP regen and lack of sustain. Fleet footwork giving him some move speed to escape and kite because his natural orb walking is god-awful, at least when you build attack speed. And working towards advantages like his top lane poking. To that end, for example, you could build press the attack, but then you don't have sustain and it's not very versatile. These are probably the most versatile and powerful top lane runes you can get. They'll be copied into the description as well, and if you want to see more rune pages for different kinds and styles of AD Thresh, let me know in the comments below, and of course, once again, let me know what you would take. This is actually my 6th time taking this because I kept just like having a coughing fit. And also I kept talking about way too many rune pages, so it would take too long and be painful for me to edit. Right now I'm trying to focus on other projects, so here we go. I was just cleaning up my rune pages because I had so many that I just didn't use. Before I start new for the new season, here we are. Anyway, that's a short video. Hope you guys learned something, enjoyed, or just confirmed what you already knew. In any case, I'll see you guys tomorrow for a new video, and see you guys soon for a new stream. I haven't been streaming recently, so I'll be back on Friday. For anyone that doesn't know, you can find my Twitch in the description. I've also not announced this on YouTube, but I now have a Twitter. I don't know what I'm using it for. It's just necessary social media for the modern era. Finally, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.